people understand change, they can understand the need for change, but the work that goes into the transition with the change can be a lot of work. And there are these key transition points of kind of who knows the information and then what they have to do to act on it.
I think that's a very interesting point that we don't like. It's not that is definitely not on the surface, right? Like the physical toll, the exhaustion that comes with that. There's almost like a cognitive load that comes with this.
If we have leaders that truly are phenomenal leaders, the what is super solid, but just as importantly, the how and their behaviors and their leadership is incredible, that's what people are going to follow.
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Learning Culture Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Barry, and this is a show about building cultures of learning inside companies. And joining me today is Allyson Carr, the head of the global HR function at Cybereason. This conversation is about managing hyper change. Allyson and her team at Cybereason went through some incredible change moments this year. They had a CEO transition. Their CFO was promoted into the CEO role. A new funding round was secured, and an M&A deal was abandoned at the final hour. We unpacked some of the key insights that she and her team developed during that time. One that particularly jumped out at me was this idea of the physical toll that change can have on people, the exhaustion and cognitive load that is often underappreciated. We also do a deep dive into a program she ran at Thermo Fisher in a previous role, which was a Leaders Building Leaders program. And I think this is a fascinating concept and idea for enabling scale at companies to really focus in on the skills that leaders need to build leaders and the mindset that involves building that bench. We wrap up our conversation talking about succession planning in more detail and this critical role that individual contributors have and why we should be thinking more about career advancement for that population. So with that, please sit back, relax, and enjoy my episode with Allyson Carr. Allyson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I am excited to dive in. I've been saying this on the last few, but I've had the pleasure of meeting you in person, spending time with you in Denver, which was a lot of fun. And then we've obviously had plenty of calls through Zoom, and now we get to record one of our conversations. And I'm excited to kind of pick apart some of your experiences in the world of HR. And to start us off, we were just talking about this offline. So schools are back. This is beginning of September. We're recording. My son, our oldest son, started kindergarten this week, and you were asking me how he's been processing that. And, it's been interesting to watch him because there's definitely something going on. On the surface, it looks like he's fine. And like, he just goes into the classroom. I mean, in the school, he doesn't look back. He seems to be shrugging it off and taking it in his stride, but there's a definite change in his behavior over the last few weeks, and just challenges. And so my wife and I have spent a lot of time thinking about this and like how there's clearly a lot that's happening below the surface. Okay, so I say all that to sort of set up our first part of our conversation here, which is around managing change, right? And so at Cybereason, you've had and I think throughout your career you've had a lot of experience doing this. What would you say is, well, actually, maybe if you could characterize the most recent change that you've had to navigate as a head of HR?
Yeah. So, as I've shared with you, as we've had some conversations over the last few summer months, we've gone through kind of hyper change the last 6 months. And with the end of Q1, March and April being a really, really time of hyper change. And so during that time, within a 2 week window, we had a change in CEOs. We are privately owned, and we got another round of funding, so that was wonderful. And we also had an M&A deal that we were in, the 11th hour, 59th minute. We decided to go a different direction. And so with that, you could look at it a bunch of different ways. Maybe some of those are negative or more concerning. Some of those are really exciting. We got more funding. But whether it was good, bad, or different, they all are types of change. And so the company has been working on that with the new CEO the past 6 months of trying to articulate our direction, where we're going, what our why is, what is changing, but then also really trying to articulate, just as importantly, what is not changing. What are going to be some of the values or some of the key products and services we offer, and what part of our direction is not changing. Because despite a lot of change, there are always going to be some norms or some continuity that we need to keep reminding people.
I mean, that's a lot. Like a CEO change is one thing. To have M&As floating around, and to have different leadership teams being integrated. I mean, that is a lot. I'm curious to go back to my example of my son. What are some of the things that surprised you, or that maybe you saw kind of that weren't on the surface, right? That was sort of underneath, as the people and the company were navigating this change.
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. I actually recently sat through a session on change management, and the part that stuck out to me the most was not actually about the change and people having a hard time with change, but rather it's the transition. People understand change, they can understand the need for change, but the work that goes into the transition with the change can be a lot of work. And there are these key transition points of kind of who knows the information and then what they have to do to act on it. And so I think the first thing I noticed, or had to be aware of and be very mindful of, was some of these things that were happening. There was a small group of people that knew about, but 98% of the company did not know about. And so some of the people had been part of those decisions, or at least had time themselves to process that this change was coming. And so they're now announcing this change, and it kind of expecting people to already be at the same pace of them, of like, yeah, you've had time to, understand it and digest it, and they haven't. And so as you cascade messages or you go through change, I think it's being very aware that, maybe the C-suite and then, or the board of directors may be aware of something, and then it's going to cascade down to the next level extended leadership team. And then it may be more of the people leaders, and then it may be the rest of the employees. And with each of those transitions and communication, allowing people time to digest it, allowing people time to have whatever reaction they have as they hear about things, good or bad, and then making sure that there's a ton of time just to answer questions, and maybe having to repeat things over and over and over. I think it's, you have to hear something 7 times for it to actually sink in. As we go through changes, giving people the chance to practice, asking questions and really letting them process things. And then I think the second most important thing is realizing that you may intellectually understand change, but there's a huge physical toll with change too. And so I'm thinking about your son going to school. He may be doing great with sitting still and following the directions and learning his numbers and letters. But he may be coming home just exhausted, and like needing to go to bed earlier, or needing more food or water or sleeping in or whatever it may be. And it's also the same. There is this physical toll that a lot of change puts on us. And so trying to be proactive with that and mindful of that, and knowing ourselves of what do we need? Do we need more sleep? Do we need to make sure we're um, talking to somebody? Are we going for walks, in between the day? Whatever that looks like for you, making sure that we're taking care of our physical self, because it's so easy to burn out.
I think that's a very interesting point that we don't like. It's not, that is definitely not on the surface, right? Like the physical toll, the exhaustion that comes with that. There's almost like a cognitive load that comes with this. We're having to like reprocess, re look at patterns and processes, and just kind of, yeah, make those adjustments to that. So yeah, I think that's really interesting, separating the intellectual understanding of the change and then the physical actual processing of it. Um, and so I'm curious, like with that context in mind, does this impact your approach to developing people? And let's start at the top. You know, developing the people, the leadership programs and even philosophies for, you know, what could be kind of an us versus them type approach, especially when you're integrating teams. You know, I know in your case it's cyber reason. There's also big cultural differences that are happening, that exist. So yeah, what are some of the what are the changes you've had to make to your approach to adapt to that?
Yeah, I think I'll share some things we have done, and then some are a little bit more theoretical of what I've either seen in other places or kind of how I think some best practices are. Um, I think the first thing is acknowledging that it's going to be hard and it's going to take time. If you're bringing two companies together or two teams together, or you're bringing in, um, some new external leaders into a team that's already kind of formed and normed, um, it can be difficult. But I think one of the things that is most important is as you're either rebuilding that team internally or bringing people externally in, really taking the time to interview or vet in some way for um, those leadership capabilities. Clearly, if people are at that level, they have the technical aptitude, they have the experience and skills under their belt. And I think at that level, as you're building or rebuilding a leadership team, it's looking for those human skills of, do they truly believe in our values? Can they communicate well? What is this person's thought on development? What is this person's thought on diversity and inclusion? Do these leaders have a growth mindset? Can they influence without authority, or is that kind of their only way of getting things done? And so, whatever those characteristics are that the CEO and the board is looking for in their team, I think it's really important to do that due diligence and take that time up front, that it's a really good culture fit, and that yes, there can be some good healthy tension there. You don't want somebody that's just going to be a yes man or yes woman, but really making sure that they have those human and those leadership and those communication skills to quickly build trust as a team. And I think that's the next step. I think as quickly as possible, and obviously, you can't force trust. Is building trust amongst the leadership team. And one of the best resources that I've seen used for leadership teams at various levels is the five dysfunctions of a team, and really, whether you officially, bring in an official facilitator for that, or, you read the book together as a team, really understanding how important trust is. And I've seen the good and the bad of when people do trust each other, how quickly things accelerate, how fast you can move. And there's just this feeling of, I'm going to assume positive intent and we're going to just keep running. And I've also seen examples where there is distrust or mistrust, and it really slows things down. It creates a lot of tension, and the respective teams, they can feel that tension, and they can feel that lack of trust. And then I think the last thing comes down to, you do all that work and you do the best you can, bringing in the right people and rounding out your team and having a diverse team and building trust, but you'll know pretty soon whether it's a fit or not. And I think the hardest thing to do is make a call. You spent a ton of money. Maybe you paid an executive recruiter. You invested all of this time and money to bring somebody in. But at the end of the day, if there is a person that is really going to not work with the culture or the direction, or really is bringing in toxicity, I think that the best thing the CEO can do is to get rid of that person. And I think people have a lot more respect for somebody who can make a tough call and make a tough call quickly versus letting something like that fester.
Yeah, I want to come back to the, you have a very close relationship with your CEO. and
Yeah.
I want to explore that a little bit as well. But just you mentioned communication a few times,
Yeah.
and this is a sort of out of left field question to you. I want to take you back 15 years. You used to be a sales rep for the
Yeah.
Kellogg company. Spent just over a year doing that. I'm wondering what you learned from doing that for over a year that you could that helps with communication and building trust and those kind of things.
Oh gosh. Okay. So yes, I was doing sales and like service and merchandising roles and going into grocery stores and stocking shelves and calling the truck drivers to see where shipments were and dealing with the grocery GMs to try to get new ads and trying to get end cap placements. And I think my biggest learning there is um, you have to you have to be willing and able to communicate with every level of somebody at a company. Yes, it's amazing if at some point you're able to have a conversation with the CEO, but it is just as important to be able to, talk to a peer who is stocking the shelves with you, or doing a price check with you, or trying to get an ad, or calling working with the logistics team and literally on the walkie-talkie talking with the truck driver, trying to understand when shipments are coming in. And I think if there's regular communication, if it is respectful communication, and you're all trying to work toward the same thing, people want to work with you. And so I think it is building relationships, getting to know people as people, and it all comes back to the trust. And if people trust you and they feel like there's that mutual respect, just everything works so much better and faster. And it's more fun too to show up to work and work with people that um, you enjoy hanging out with.
Yeah, and that you understand as well. I think that's another part in that story is like getting to know people at every different level and kind of what their view of the company is and what their perspective is, and that's invaluable in the long run if you do that early and upfront. Um, okay, so you mentioned, I mean, you told me that you have a very close relationship with your CEO. I think that started from when you were being recruited into this role. And that's huge. I think a lot of talent development and chief people officers listening will, some may have that and, some may want that or will recognize how important this is. I'm curious how it's helped you get get the company kind of rowing in the same direction, like getting people to think company first versus like me first or functions first or whatever, but like getting everyone on that same page. How has like being close to the CEO helped with that?
Yeah, so the backstory there is the current CEO used to be our CFO. And during all of this time of change, the CFO was promoted by the board to be our CEO. So the CFO was the one that recruited me in to lead the HR function. And so we built a really great relationship because I think that kind of any business, the roles that I've seen and go best or where there's the CEO or the general manager or the president, their finance partner and the HR partner all working really well together. And so the fact that I had that really good relationship with him in his CFO capacity and finance and HR were working so well together, I think that made his transition to CEO and then moving the HR function from reporting to the CFO upward to reporting to the CEO. I think it sent a message, and I think that that has really helped for people to see that HR and our people function truly has a seat at the table. It's not buried under legal or finance or ops, and it's really part of our broader company strategy. Um, your questions about if how to help people come along and be company first. I I struggle with that one if especially at large companies, I think this is very hard, but even at like small to mid-sized companies, I think it is hard for employees to be company first because a company is not a person, it's not a thing. A company, doesn't love you back. So I think what is more easy to relate to people is their team, that relationship that they have with their leader, the relationship that they have with their coworkers. And if we have leaders that truly are phenomenal leaders, the what is super solid, but just as importantly, the how and their behaviors and their leadership is incredible. That's what people are going to follow. People don't follow a company; they follow their leaders. They follow their, the direction of somebody that they feel that they trust. They feel like they have their best interest. They feel like they're working for a high potential team, and they're part of something bigger. And so, I think it's less about, yes, you want people to understand the company direction and how they fit into the broader goals. But I think what we have control over is hiring leaders and promoting leaders and putting people in those positions of leadership and power that truly care about developing their teams. Because if their teams feel like they have a leader who actually cares, that's what's going to be moving people along. And so I think it's all about some of the decisions you make about who you put in key leadership roles.
And when you came into this company, you had leaders in place, and one of the things that I think you're probably bringing to this role is something you did really well at Thermo Fisher. And I'm curious to kind of explore that. You told me about the Thermo Fisher experience, and I'm going to maybe take a leap here to to how you are implementing this at Cyber Reason. But I want to explore this because we've talked about like the importance of putting the right leaders in the right place. But then there's the second layer of leaders. There's the layers of leaders, right? And what you did at Thermo Fisher was have a program that was you told me it was leaders building leaders. So there's a
Yes.
compounding effect that's happening now, which is really interesting. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit more about the program you ran at Thermo Fisher and what was successful about that?
Yes. Okay. So this is one of my favorite, you know, stories, because obviously it was true, but I just think one of the best examples of a self-driven and leadership-driven leadership program. So yes, it was a program at Thermo Fisher. It started out as a pilot, and it's been very successful over the past 3 to 4 years. And it was called Leaders Building Leaders. And the kind of the impetus for it was, so Thermo Fisher, if people don't know it, it's huge. It's publicly traded. When I left, we had, gosh, probably 134,000 employees all over the world, and it's huge. So the company has groups and has divisions and it has business units. And so our group said we wanted to pilot um, a leadership development program. Well, we weren't asking L&D for any support or resources. We wanted to build something internally. And the reason we wanted to do this is because when we would go through annual processes like calibration or into succession planning, but performance reviews and calibration were a big one. Our leaders were phenomenal at articulating the what. They had all their KPIs, all their metrics, tons of dashboards. They would come in with mountains of data to make the case for why these people should get the best possible ratings because we had a super strict distribution curve. And they could nail the what. But when you were asked about the how did they show up? Help me understand the behaviors. Let's talk about the company competencies. Let's talk about the company leadership philosophy. It was very common that people really struggled with that. You got a lot of answers like, well, their team just loves them, or they're super easy to work with, or they're always available. Maybe you'd get somebody who would bring in an engagement survey score for a little bit of data, but normally people just had a really hard time articulating leadership. And so we said, okay, we're not going to build something new because the company is huge and already has tons of process and structure. But what I think it did really well was it said, we're not going to recreate the wheel. We already have leadership competencies. And the competencies were developing high performing teams, creating successful work environments, and moving strategy to action. Those three said we're going to take, and when I say we, this was the president of this group and their leadership team got together and did an offsite and said, we're going to actually articulate if people were putting these into practice, what would this look like if somebody, like we actually said a leader could move strategy to action. But we said this leader was excellent at building high performing teams. What does that actually look like? And so they spent articulating this and making it very tangible for people to understand, oh, I could go bring some examples of these competencies back that are much, much easier to understand. And so it started with the president and our leadership team. And from there, we built out some training decks and resources. We built out some self assessment scorecards and things like that, just to start a conversation of this is our philosophy. We really believe that the how and the behaviors are just as important. And when we said, okay, all vice presidents, the next time we roll into a calibration session or succession planning, we're going to expect that you have a bunch of examples about our leadership capabilities as well as the performance. And I think what the reason it went well is we didn't start from scratch. We built on something that the company already had, but we made it tangible. Secondly, it was led by the business. So this was not some HR initiative where all the HR business partners had to go teach it. We did a ton of trainings, but the HR team identified who are all those people in the upper right hand of the 9 box who also are secretly coded as hypo employees. And let's go work with these directors, senior directors, and vice presidents and have them be the champions of this because we've already said that they're phenomenal on it. Let's go learn from them about how they're doing this and let's have them go be the teachers of this. And so the first year it was training all the vice presidents and giving them a year or so to understand the language, to practice showing up to annual processes with, they brought their piece of paper and they're articulating, I'm talking about this competency, et cetera. Year 2, we took it down to directors and the rest of the senior directors. And then year 3, we were taking it to managers and senior managers. So after 3 years, we had trained hundreds and hundreds of people leaders on this concept of leaders building leaders and what good leadership looks like. And a couple of ways that I felt like we really were walking the talk and we knew it was successful was I'll give a couple examples. Yes, you can always look at engagement survey scores, things like that. But 2 things that I thought were phenomenal were it was year 2. It was calibration season, and they were at the point of discussing and calibrating the vice presidents. And, at this point, everybody is high performing. Everybody's doing a phenomenal job. And again, the company has very strict distribution guidelines. And so they were at a stalemate. And someone was pushing really hard for this VP, and somebody was pushing really hard for this VP. And the president and the head of HR said, this is great, but we're not making an exception to our guidelines. Walk me through all their leadership capabilities and walk me through all the examples of how they have been a leader and how they have built leaders on their team. And at the end of the day, that was the tiebreaker. And so it really was an example of, okay, we're about 1.5 years in, and we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're giving the best ratings, and we're giving the promotions, and we're giving the higher salary increases to the people that are really focused on leadership, just as much as performance. So I think that was, it set a great tone for this is something that this group is super serious about. And then happy to talk more about succession planning too, but I think succession planning is the other key way where we were able to say this is having very measurable impact for our talent management processes too.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to call out there, you mentioned the word examples a lot, and that to me, the examples, to me, another word for the stories, like these case studies, are kind of the secret ingredient to a lot of this. Like that's what brings this to life. That's what makes it real and practical. And then you kind of support that with some of the other data, but the stories bring the data to life in a big way. So I just want to underscore that. Let's talk about the succession planning piece as well, just to kind of tie the knot here in terms of, because a lot of people also listening are, and who I talk to, are looking for ways to measure the success of programs. So yeah, how were you able to do that from a succession planning point of view?
Yeah. So I think the Leaders Building Leaders program or any sort of leadership development definitely helps with your promotion process and your calibration process. But I feel like the process that truly helps the most is succession planning. And so I feel like the first thing with succession planning, if your company does not do it, is helping leaders understand what it is and why it's important, and that we're not, trying to force you out or have somebody, take your job, and also distinguishing between what is a successor and also what is a coverage plan. Because I've seen a lot of people conflate the two and say, well, this person can cover for me when I'm out. Yes, but that's more of a coverage planning model than a succession planning model. So I think that's, step number one. I think the next thing then is getting your baseline. And when I've rolled out succession planning with leaders who haven't done it before, there's a lot of empty boxes. And that's okay. Because we'll say, who's ready, who's in the position right now, who's ready now, who's ready in 1 to 2 years, and then who's in that ready 2+ box. And there's a lot of people in the 2+ box, but we don't have, in some scenarios, people ready now or people ready 1 to 2 years. And that is just fine. But I think it's then a conversation about what is your talent philosophy of what positions and what mix are we going to have promoting from within, and where do we want to have people very intentionally brought in from the outside. And so over time, you should start to see a multicolored box, of maybe the hot pink are the external candidates and the bright blue are the internal candidates. But I would say if you're having a lot of blanks to begin with, the first step would be you need to be working your external network, and you need to start filling in some of these spots over the next 90 days with some external candidates. And then over time, we're going to start working on leadership and development, and we're going to move these people internally, hopefully up through the ranks. And then the last piece is just working the plan. And you'll see it, and it's not going to be a quick win. Yes, you can fill in boxes with names, but really it's seeing the progress that could take potentially a year or 2 years to actually see the progress there. But you'll see it where if you say, okay, we did succession planning, I see that Allyson is sitting in 1 to 2. 6 months later, okay, I see Allyson sitting in ready 1 to 2. 6 months later, okay, I see Allyson is still sitting in 1 to 2. And when you're not seeing people move from, ready in 2+ to ready 1 to 2 or ready 1 to 2, they can never get into the ready now. It starts to encourage some of those conversations with the leaders of what is it that Allyson's not demonstrating that can't get her to ready now? Or is this leader, do they have an insecurity about something? Or are they concerned this person's going to take their role? Or are they the type of leader that they only promote somebody when they're already doing the job? They don't promote them when they're, 70% ready. So I think if you're starting to see some staleness and lack of movement, you can have some really good conversations with the leaders about why we're not seeing movement. And then with other leaders, you'll see, hey, over 6, 12, 18 months, I'm really seeing some nice movement of people moving up in the succession plan. And we're seeing that we are picking dedicated people that we're going to put through our leadership plans that we're taking bets on because we want to accelerate their development too.
Hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating, and it sounds like you've been thinking and working on that for a long time, and it definitely shows. I there is a final question here. We've been kind of working our way down from that executive leadership to the messy middle that we've been spending on now. I'm curious for your perspective on the individual contributors at companies, and specifically the the learning paths and succession paths for them, right? Because you can't promote everyone. It's my anecdotal experience now at clients that a lot of companies are starting to realize how irreplaceable ICs actually are, especially as tools now like AI allow them to do so much more on their own and to make such a big impact. And I'm curious how you think about that population and the investment in learning pathways for them.
Yes. No, I completely agree. ICs are incredibly important. And I think it's also great to have a career path for people that don't want to manage people. That should not be the only way to continue to advance. And yeah, we need to have other opportunities for growth for ICs. I think the most successful individual contributors I've seen are ones that, even if they do not technically manage people and they're not doing performance evaluations and having one-on-ones every week, They are those leaders that when you are asked to describe them, words like collaborator and ability to influence, those are like things that come to the top of the list, where they don't have to be running a team to get along with so many different types of people, to be able to be an active participant, to move problems or programs or problems along, and to influence people without being their manager. I actually think it is wildly more impressive to be able to influence people when you don't have authority over them. So those are the type of skills that I think if your ICs do not have those skills, focusing more on building trust, building relationships, collaborating, and influence without authority, I think are huge. And then there is that sweet spot though of acknowledging that these ICs may be incredible at their job, but you also don't want them to be a bottleneck or a point of failure if they're the only person that knows this. So being really thoughtful about how do you have an understudy, if you will, or how can you you know help them as part of their development plan, train somebody else, either whether it's cross training or as part of their legacy, they want to start to share this knowledge with potentially new hires there that are coming in. But how can you encourage that training from them, so that way we're getting all of that goodness and all of the insights that they have, and making sure that that doesn't get lost.
So I'm glad we agree on the skills, because that's exactly what we see as well. And I think you've nailed it with the influencing without authority, the cross-functional collaboration. Yeah, and I agree. I think it's a huge opportunity for companies. So one final question for you, Allyson. Why do you do what you do?
Mm, I, I do what I do because I think that people have so much potential, and I want to be part of. I think that the being on the people team, there's so much opportunity to build, and I've told people I'm really energized by building. I love building, processes and programs. But even more than that, I love building people, and I love building teams, and I love building leaders. And when you can see something inside of somebody, and maybe they don't quite know they have it, or they don't, they know they have a little bit of it, but they just need somebody to have some of that encouragement in them. It's amazing to see somebody develop their leadership skills, develop their people skills, and just grow as a person. So the opportunity to build people and help people, and push people to be the best they can be.
Beautifully said. Allyson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Andrew. Great to talk to you.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.